8 U.S. presidents were born in and grew up in Virginia, the most out of any other state in the U.S., giving Virginia the nickname, the Mother of Presidents. George Washington, who was born and raised in Virginia, became our very first president.
And for good or for bad, he left an undeniable mark on the history of Virginia. But he also left a literal mark.
Legend has it that in 1749, George Washington carved his initials into the side of a naturally formed limestone rock in Western Virginia. The letters GW have drawn visitors from around the world to this Virginia landmark. So who's to say? Is everything we read in history books always as it seems? Did George actually carve his initials into this famous rock?
Well, in this video, I'm going to live like George Washington for a few days and find out what's fact and what's fiction.
I'm Gray Walters, and this is Out of Office. And this is George Washington. And to start, I think we need to know a little bit more about this guy.
And what better place than where it all began? Ferry Farm. Ferry Farm is where George spent a lot of his childhood, and it's actually right across the Rappahannock River from the town of Fredericksburg.
George moved into this house in 1738 at the age of 6, and it later became known as Ferry Farm because people crossed the river on a ferry from the farm to the town of Fredericksburg.
This is also where George would have cut down his father's cherry tree. Or is it?
You see, not all legends are true. There is no cherry tree. The story of the cherry tree is simply a myth created by Washington's first autobiographer to make him seem more honest.
So in that case, I don't know what to believe.
So the truth is, a lot of the history of that time was written after the fact. So that means a lot of the notable people from that time have been written about in stories to make them seem better than they were.
So I guess the only thing left to do is visit George Washington's old stomping grounds to figure out what else about his life might not have been what it seemed. So what better way to really understand our first president than to spend the night in his original townhouse? Or at least a pretty close replica of the original townhouse that was rebuilt in the 1960s.
At age 30, George purchased this lot and would spend a lot of time here when visiting the city of Alexandria. But George's connection to the city actually goes a lot further back. At age 17, George was living in Alexandria working as a surveyor and actually played a large role in the formation of the city streets as we see them today.
And he was often a frequent visitor to a place that still exists today, Gadsby's Tavern.
Gadsby's Tavern opened its doors in 1770, and George Washington dined here frequently in the late 1700s. As I ate my presidential meat and potatoes, I couldn't help but wonder.
So if George really did carve his initials into that rock face, first of all, why? And second of all, what would have brought him out there? Well, in 1748, George would have been 16 working full-time as a surveyor. In that same year, he would have been asked to accompany a surveying expedition to explore the then uninhabited parts of Virginia. So this would have taken him all over the western part of the state in Shenandoah Valley, including the Natural Bridge and what will later become known as Charlottesville. Now, George and his fellow explorers at the time thought they were going out to explore the uninhabited parts of Virginia, but in reality, those parts of Virginia were very much inhabited by several Native American tribes. In 1748, the area that would become Charlottesville was home to the Monacan tribe, but I'm sure we all associate Charlottesville with this guy, our old pal, Thomas Jefferson.
Yes, Thomas Jefferson would eventually call Charlottesville home, and walking around, it's pretty clear the mark that Jefferson has left on this small town.
For example, the University of Virginia. So what do Charlottesville and Thomas Jefferson have to do with George carving his initials?
Well, this is Monticello, the home of Thomas Jefferson, and as you can see, these buildings look very similar to the buildings on the UVA campus.
Because Jefferson loved architecture and wanted to leave his architectural mark on the world.
But when George was first passing through in 1748, Jefferson was only 6 years old at the time.
Actually, Thomas Jefferson's father, Peter Jefferson, had more in common with George at this time.
Peter Jefferson was also a surveyor during the mid-1700s, and is most famously associated with creating the first definitive map of Virginia. He and George would have been traveling throughout Virginia at the same time, and may or may not have crossed paths.
So that being said, 6-year-old Thomas Jefferson is still very important to this story. And to tell that story, I know just the place.
If you've ever been to Monticello, then you've probably been to Mickey Tavern. Still serving up colonial cuisine, the tavern officially opened in 1784, so it's possible that Jefferson could have had a drink or two here. Several years after George Washington's surveying expedition to the western parts of Virginia, Jefferson would also find himself at the Natural Bridge.
So, as you might expect, Jefferson loved the Natural Bridge. He loved it so much that he purchased it for himself 25 years later in the year 1773. So that makes him forever entangled into this mystery.
Jefferson and Washington would go on to become forever frenemies, and were always in disagreement over something.
So I think that after finding out that George had discovered this bridge many years earlier, that's when he decided to purchase the bridge out of spite, to leave his mark on the area. Well, I guess it's finally time to head to Natural Bridge once and for all. So to get the full Natural Bridge experience, what better way than to spend the night in the historic Natural Bridge Hotel? So what even is the Natural Bridge? And why does everyone love it so much? Standing at over 200 feet tall, the towering limestone arch sits within a gorge formed by Cedar Creek over millions of years. Thomas Jefferson purchased the land in 1773. Okay. Yeah, there is nothing in here about George Washington. Wait. Tradition says that George Washington may have carved his initials GW on the wall under Natural Bridge about 25 feet above Cedar Creek. Maybe there is some truth to it.
Tomorrow, we're going to find out for sure. It's tomorrow. As I make my way to the bridge and walk the final steps of this journey, am I ready for the outcome? An outcome that may change history forever. Okay, I get it. I completely understand why people love this so much. It's really hard to capture this on camera, but it is so surreal. Now imagine you're out exploring the countryside and you come across this. I mean, I'd carve my initials here. And the moment we've all been waiting for, George Washington's initials. So even after all my research, I still don't know what to believe, and I think it could go either way. On one hand, it's very plausible that George found this really cool thing and wanted to put his mark on it. On the other hand, someone else could have carved the initials to create a sense of lore. And it's also very possible that an enslaved person who was with George at the time was instructed to carve the initials for him. Maybe Jefferson wanted to honor his longtime comrade by amplifying the legend of the initials. Or maybe it was me. My initials are also GW. Could I have traveled back in time and carved my own initials up there? Probably not. But what I do know is that my grandparents actually came here for their honeymoon back in the 1950s. So this place has always been very special to me. And maybe that's what it's all about. Fact or fiction, it's about our connection to a place, not the mark we leave behind. And like George Washington, he was connected to this place, his forever home, Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon began as a 1.5-story house built in 1734 by George Washington's father. George officially took over Mount Vernon in 1754, and over the next 45 years slowly enlarged the dwelling to create the 21-room residence we see today. While some things we know about George may not be true, like his wooden teeth and allegedly skipping a rock over the river here. So what is true is this place and the view that George would have woken up to every morning. So in the end, we may never know who carved those initials, but we do know that Virginia is steeped in the history of America. And so you have to get out there and make your own adventure to discover it. You never know what you'll find. Well, guess that's it. Got to get back to the office. Catch you on the next one. In 2026, the United States is celebrating its 250th anniversary, and in Virginia, there are numerous historic sites celebrating this milestone with special events all year long. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more adventures like this around Virginia.